Ravi Shankar here again, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about my forthcoming memoir, Correctional, which is due out hopefully September of 2021 with University of Wisconsin Press. It's under advanced contract now. And this story encompasses not the trajectory of my life, but looks at my parents' own immigration from South India. My father came to the US in the late 1960s after there was, of course, the Asian Exclusion Act that prevented a lot of immigration from happening. And my father was part of the first wave of South Asians to come over to go to school at Howard University. And I remember as a kid, I used to think it was Harvard, but no, it was Howard in DC. And I can't imagine what it was like. My father's very stern, orthodox, Brahmin man who doesn't really talk very much about anything, let alone his past. And I only now realize that he was living in Washington, D.C. when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and when the National Guard was sent in and there were the riots and half the city was burnt down. And really mind-boggling to kind of imagine my father at that time. But he then returned to India to have a prearranged marriage with my mother, who he met once, who was much younger than him. He was almost 30 and she was 19. She was a kind of a prodigy, getting her master's in education when her father told her that she needed to marry this man. And they used Vedic astrology then to see if it was a suitable match. And then my mother, 6 months later, left everyone she knew to move halfway across the world to live with this man who is now her husband. It's a pretty common immigrant story, but still, for me, feels like such a immense and courageous journey. And so I was born in Washington, D.C. And the memoir kind of starts at that point, but then it goes to different places and primarily rests on my experiences with the American criminal justice system. And I actually moved back to India when I was about 9 and went to school and lived there for a year and a half. And then I returned and was very much supposed to follow my father's footsteps as an engineer. Instead, I became a poet and a professor. And in 2011, after I left New York, where I'd lived for many years, I'd lived in New York through 9/11, I was driving back from a literary event in Midtown, and I was stopped by the cops with my cousin making a legal left turn on the 6th Ave from 34th Street, and was given a breathalyzer, which I passed. And then the officer said, "I've got good news for you, professor." I had made the mistake of telling him I was a professor. Never a good thing to do. If you are in a situation like that, I say the less is more, the less you say is better. But he said, "I have good news for you, professor. You passed the breathalyzer. I've got bad news. There's a warrant out for your arrest." And I thought, I hadn't lived in New York in over a decade. And I was shocked, but he shoved me up against the side of the building and put me in cuffs and put me in the back of the paddy wagon. And as he closed the door, I heard he turned to his partner and said, "It's always a good day when you can bag a sand nigger." And that was, I'm a New Yorker. I'd lived in the city, and that kind of what happened, it was not something I could even fabricate. And I ended up spending 72 hours in central booking. It turned out that the warrant was for a 5'6" white guy who had a similar sounding name as me. And so when I came out, I was on my soapbox, and I wrote an op-ed, and I was on NPR. In fact, I sued the city of New York, and I won a minor settlement from them. And, but what I didn't realize is that my life from that moment had transformed in these subconscious ways, and I became more paranoid and more reckless. I think I was probably always a bit of an anarchist poet, but I had these other encounters. I had this trouble with my credit card, and then I had a DUI. And my license was suspended. And meanwhile, I'm a professor at a state university. And I very idiotically, because my license was suspended for 6 months and there's no public transportation in Connecticut. I would Uber sometimes and walk, but I also sometimes rolled the dice and I drove, and I got a flat tire, and I was waiting for the tow truck when a cop pulls up, a state trooper, and instead of asking if I needed help, asked for my license and registration, which was, of course, suspended. And so as a result, I had to do 90 days in Hartford Correctional. And that is really what this book, Correctional, is about. It's about that time, and it was stretched out in such a way that it wouldn't interfere with my teaching schedule, which sounds like a good deal, except that it meant that I had to go in 6 times to be processed and strip searched and humiliated and put on the uniform to go in. It was nothing like I expected. I was in a dorm with 60 other men. And there was a kind of a community there. And the men that I met, who were mainly brown and black, might have had drug problems or mental health issues, but many of them didn't belong in jail. They weren't being helped or rehabilitated in any real way. And what happened, it was a pretrial detention. I hadn't been convicted of anything, that I would end up doing as much time in jail as that Stanford swimmer who raped the unconscious woman, if you recall, who wrote a really powerful victim impact statement, which I recommend. But in any event, I mean, I certainly did something really stupid I shouldn't have done. And so, but as a result, over Christmas break, over fall break, I had to go do these little parcels of time. And it just so happened that it was the year that I was up for promotion. And because I had exceeded all of the expectations, it had been signed off by everyone, from the chair to the provost to the president. And just at the end of the year, had to be rubber stamped by the Board of Regents. And it was just when I was meant to finish off this 90-day sentence. And somehow a Republican senator, former Republican senator who was a columnist at the Hartford Courant, got a hold of this news, and that it became enormous news in Connecticut. Poet and professor promoted while in prison. It's got that kind of alliterative ring, but also I realize now was a way in an election year to score points against the Democratic governor who'd appointed the Board of Regents. And so this story is about that experience, about what it was like to, have media camera vans outside of my house where my little daughter was going to school, and what I learned about this hidden part of America that we all know about, the mass incarceration state. But the stories of these men who I spent time with, and when I was leaving, they begged me to tell their story. They said that I had a voice that they didn't have, and they said, please tell the world something about us. And so Correctional is that. It encompasses all of that. It also talks about sharing a name with the world's most famous sitar player. And ultimately, I hope it's a message of hope and redemption that takes account of where we are as a country, as a world, and tries to heal some of that. Certainly, it's very introspective, and I hope revelatory book for those who read it. So look out for it next year.